So I, honestly speaking, have struggled throughout my life with spiritual practices. And I know as a preacher, as a pastor, somebody who's gone through seminary, all that stuff, I'm supposed to be super good at that sort of thing, right? The kind of, I always imagined anyway that, my father's the guy who would wake up at 6 a.m., drive out to a secluded place and just pray in silence for 2 hours before every day started. And I thought that is how you're supposed to do it. And I could never do it. My ADD brain would never let me sit still for that long and be in meditation. And I always felt like I wasn't spiritual enough. Until maybe just honestly the past couple of years, I've discovered that my deeply spiritual moments come in nature. Not in my own head, in my own heart and soul, struggling with the mysteries of the divine and the darkness within. It is more when I am among living things, they teach me. They show me the deep wisdom of the universe. And I was out in my garden a couple of days ago, and I was marveling in my passion fruit, which has started, the fruits have started to get ripe, and they are delicious, and they are wonderful, and these flowers are just stunning things. They look like they're from Dr. Seuss. They bloom for one day, and then they're gone. It's like nature could only handle the spectacle for just a moment, or else it would be too much. And I was watching the bees on them, and I was thinking about the bees, and I noticed just how perfect the Carpenter bee is to the passion flower. And of course, I'm also not just a contemplative, but I'm a super nerd, and so I pulled out my phone right there in the garden and was like, is this intentional? Is this an evidence of coevolution? And it is. And let me show you what I mean. I took a little video here. It might take a second to load, as these things do. I want you to notice how perfectly shaped this is. You see these little yellow bits here? That's where the pollen is. The pollen, instead of like other flowers where it's kind of mixed throughout, it dangles over the top to perfectly brush up against that little furry bit on top of the Carpenter bee. These two, aren't they adorable too? The nectar is in the middle. All of this spectacle around it is to catch its attention. The nectar is in the middle, and this is where the pollen is, so that it can rub its little furry bits against it and carry the pollen outward. The two of them, over millions of years together, grew together to evolve in a way that is mutually beneficial. Because the two of them grew as one in this beautiful dance of mutuality that we call coevolution. Now, meanwhile, the bee that we're always talking about, the honeybee, save the honeybee, save the honeybee. Not even from North America, have you? They're African, brought here by colonists in order to, for their groves and vineyards and whatnot. Let me show you what happens when a honeybee approaches the passion flower. The honeybee takes the nectar, but look, she's too short. She doesn't reach the pollen. She doesn't do any pollination of this flower. All she does is take. Because she has co-evolved with the flowers of Africa and has been taken from her home where she is well equipped and brought to a place where she is not. And as I watched these bees and the flower moving through this mystical dance of evolutionary mutuality, I thought to myself, there is something about wisdom in this. Something mysterious happening here that is an evidence of some underlying wisdom that undergirds life itself as we know it. Not the sort of wisdom that we often talk about the sort of wisdom that's like more discernment and knowing when to act and what to say, the kind of, Solomon threatening to cut a baby in half to find its true owner, that kind of wisdom, the applied wisdom. I'm not talking about that kind of wisdom, but the sort of wisdom that is like the source code of the universe, the sort of wisdom that lies beneath conscious thought, the kind of wisdom that holds life itself together, the sort of primeval structure that undergirds the cosmos itself. And when we are, being wise and making wise decisions, I think we're tapping into that cosmic wisdom, but it exists separately from our human lives. It existed before humanity evolved. It'll exist after we've blown ourselves up. And I want to get to our reading, Proverbs 9, in just a moment, because I think that kind of applied wisdom is much more applicable to your daily lives than the sort of like out here kind of ethereal, big picture, cosmic wisdom stuff. But before we do, I want to try to tap into that deep mystery, into that cosmic wisdom, which is beautifully talked about in the previous chapter, Proverbs 8, in which wisdom speaks for herself in the first person, in this gorgeous poem. And I'm going to read it to you, and I'm not going to put the words up on the screen. I don't want you in your head. I want you to imagine this. I want you to imagine her wisdom. She says, "The Lord created me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of long ago. Ages ago I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth, when there was no springs abounding with water. Before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills, I was brought forth. When he had not yet made earth and fields or the world's first bits of soil, when he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep, when he made firm the skies above, when he established the fountains of the deep, when he assigned to the sea its limit so that the waters might not transgress his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him like a master worker, and I was daily his delight, playing before him always. Playing in his inhabited world and delighting in the human race. And now, my children, listen to me. Happy are those who keep my ways. Hear instruction and be wise, and do not neglect it. Happy is the one who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting beside my doors. For whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. But those who miss me injure themselves, and all who hate me love death." I think there's a lot of things that we could say about cosmic wisdom, a lot of attributes, qualities that we could ascribe to her, but I want to focus in on one today: mutuality. She is created by God and immediately enters into this mutual relationship with all things. I love in that passage where she describes herself as playing while God creates. That play and joy and delight is holy. It is a part of things. That creation is not just made to be dominated and understood, but it is made to be delighted in, to be in relationship with. She calls out humanity from the very beginning to be in relationship with her. She does not exist for her own benefit, for her own glory, for her own domination over what is. She exists for connection and for mutuality. And in her image, all life evolves over the next 4.2 billion years. And in that process of evolution, as we have seen through natural selection, the selfish and destructive animals who take more than they give from the environment end up going extinct. They end up killing themselves. Whereas the creatures who learn that thriving is mutual, that all flourishing involves your neighbor, the creatures that co-evolve with one another, changing themselves to better serve their neighbor, that who is likewise changing themselves to better serve their neighbor. Those creatures that strive for thriving, those are the creatures that survive, that evolve, that end up being the species that we have now. Of course, animals don't choose to evolve. It wasn't like the passion flower one day was like, you know what? This bee is exactly 2 centimeters high. I think I'm going to grow a little dangly bit to like put some pollen on its back where it can't reach it to get rid of it. You know, if I put her on the underside, it'll just shake it off. But if I get it up here, they can't move it like a kick me sign. It didn't think that. We know that most of these creatures, they can't decide to evolve any more than we can decide to grow wings tomorrow. They don't need to, however, because none of this is a choice. It is built into life itself. It is simply the wisdom of life. So we see her wisdom in the carpenter bee and the passion flower, each one over untold millions of years adapting to better serve the other in a dance of love and mutuality. But mutual flourishing, as it were, is not a simple fix. It is not something that one just jumps into and is like, well, suddenly now we're all good and fine and peace has taken over all things, right? I mean, it took them millions of years of slow and intentional life together. It requires time and relationship. In our reading today in Proverbs 9, wisdom prepares a meal. You notice this? She makes steak and spiced wine, food that must be digested, and wine that invites a long meal with conversation, with relationship. Foolishness invites you in for stolen bread, cheap carbohydrates, and death. That's what foolishness gives you. Foolishness is the one who says, I have candy, come in my van. And wisdom is the one who says, I have prepared a large meal for you and I to come in fellowship. Come and let's take 3 hours together. Wisdom, like evolution, is slow. I've mentioned this before. When I was in my 20s, I was a member of a hipster social justice church in South Philly, filled with well-meaning young people who thought that we were going to change the world. We were doing something new with the church, and so because we were doing something new, we were doing something better, and we would never partner with anyone else because that would be going backwards, right? To partner with a traditional church or someone that's doing things the wrong way, we had the right way, we were going to do it. So I was the manager of our church's thrift store, which was very successful. And a part of that was we gave 5% of our profits back to nonprofits in the community as a way of giving back to those around us. And so it was one of my jobs was to find people to give money to, which you would think would be a very easy thing to do. I remember one time in particular, I was trying to find someone to give money to, and somebody from the church suggested, oh, there's an organization in Point Breeze that is doing some good work. You should give it to them. And I looked them up, and I had the check written out and everything for $500, and I went to the building. Nobody would answer. I called and called and called. Eventually, I did talk to someone, and they said, no, thank you. And I was like, no, you don't understand. I don't want anything from you. We are in the community. We want to give back. We know you're doing good things. Here's $500 for your mission. And they said, nothing comes without strings. And I was like, no, it's fine. Look, we're this church here. We're doing great things in the community. And he was like, no, we don't know you. We don't trust you. And we don't want to be in anyone's debt. Because Point Breeze at that time was in the early stages of gentrification. from people like us, the well-meaning suburban white kids who had moved in to the neighborhood and, opened up cool hipster pizza places and coffee shops and stuff, and was starting to drive up prices, and they were having to leave their neighborhoods. They didn't trust us because I didn't know them. I didn't know who they were. I didn't offer to help with their outreach, what they were doing first. I was just coming in as a savior, not as somebody interested in mutual flourishing. Our presence in that community was like a honeybee in my garden. We were an introduced species that does good things, but does not have that long history of mutuality with the local flora, and so is not a particularly good pollinator. It was kind of like the honeybee telling the passion flower to bend a little bit lower because we're really good pollinators and we've got this good thing going on, and if you want to be a part of it, you should come down to our level, when we planted Open Table, we tried to be really intentional not to be that kind of church. We did not want to come in with this mentality that we had finally, after 2,000 some odd years, figured out church, and we had finally figured out how to fix communities. We wanted not to reinvent the wheel, but to partner with people who are embedded in Pottstown doing what Pottstown does. Which honestly was a little easier than it would have been with other churches because so many of y'all are lifers and are deeply committed and connected already to Pottstown. So we didn't have quite as much of that saviorism going on. But then we started planning Pottstown's first ever Pride Fest, and I am not a member of the LGBTQ community, and I found myself in a situation where I had to be cognizant of my good intentions being like the honeybee and not like the carpenter bee. This is not my world. I don't have the ultimate say in this. I needed to make sure that I was letting people in the community lead the organizing of it and do what I am told. I tried to go through extra efforts to even make sure that calling it Pottstown Pride wasn't going to step on the feet of local organizers who had been doing other things in Pottstown, because I didn't want to come in and colonize this celebration of joy and unity and love. And despite all of that, I know that I wasn't fully successful, and I'm sure that I need to continue to humble myself and my good intentions in the name of mutual thriving and that long work of relationship building. But that's what separates justice from charity, doesn't it? Charity seeks to solve a problem and make the volunteer feel good about themselves and the world. Whereas justice, in the words of Mary, Mother of Jesus, seeks to humble the mighty and lift up the lowly so that both can grow with, into, and through one another mutually. So how do we do this work? How do we work out the deep time of cosmic wisdom in the limited number of days that we have? To be honest with you, I'm not sure. And I'd love to hear your wisdom from your collective lives as well. But my gut tells me to follow Lady Wisdom, to prepare a table, to invite relationships, to be open to personal change. Steady, consistent presence brings about growth and change in ourselves and in those that we seek to serve. And I knew that this is true of spirituality as well. I've grown in my connection to that deep, deep cosmic wisdom, to the Spirit of God, when I have consistently sought God's presence in normal, everyday, relational sort of ways, not just the big revival meetings and whatnot, but like the little things, being grateful for my flowers, asking for patience when I'm a terrible father most of the time. My intuition tells me that spiritual, personal, and societal flourishing are all connected in this way to the deep cosmic wisdom, to the same power source. that undergirds all of the universe. But what do you think? This is not rhetorical. Does that bring up any thoughts, insights? How have you in your life found mutual flourishing to be possible?